Hello everyone, bringing you the Mannequin of the Month for July 2020 today. And the topic for this, as usual, has been picked by the Corporal tier over on Patreon. And what we're going to be talking about today is the uniform and equipment of a private in the 1st Battalion of the Loyal North Lancashire Regiment in France in 1914. The 1st Battalion arrived in France at Le Havre on the 12th of August 1914, and this represents a man on the march or in transit at some point between then and the Battle of Mons, so very early in Britain's involvement in the Great War. The equipment is very much as it would have been immediate pre-war. There's very little taken place yet to force measures of economy, very little introduced in terms of new equipment and so forth. There are some changes to peacetime soldiering, but they're not particularly visible. We'll talk about those as we move the mannequin around. So, starting at the top, as we normally do, talking about the uniform, we have here the service dress cap. Still the standard service dress cap at this time. Obviously this would be supplemented as the war continued with the soft service cap, and prior to that of course the winter forage cap as well, but they had not made an appearance yet of course, so obviously the standard British Army service dress cap of the time. That bears the cap badge for the regiment, which you can see there, and we'll get a close-up of that now. As you can see, this is a bimetal cap badge, and we have the Imperial State Crown surmounted by the lion, and beneath this we have the Red Rose of Lancashire, and around that sits a scroll with the words Loyal North Lancashire. The cap of course is made of the same serge cloth as the uniform being the standard service dress of the time. Now this is a post-war service dress jacket, but it is a suitable stand-in here in terms of the pocket layout, the cut and so forth, a little bit more closely tailored than Great War examples, and some detail differences, missing the darts on the just below the collar here and so forth, but otherwise visually very, very similar. Not a huge amount of detail difference there, so that serves as a suitable stand-in here. The web equipment is the standard 1908 pattern, very much standard for infantry at this time, for regular infantry, and this is worn essentially as per the fitting instructions, with one concession which I'll talk about as we move this round, one alteration to the way it's supposed to be worn according to the fitting instructions, which is very common even early in the war. It does show up in period photographs. We'll talk about that as we move this round, because that's actually round the back. What we have at the front here, obviously we have the belt with the twig buckle, the braces coming down to support the cartridge carriers, and these are the left cartridge carrier here, as we'll see as we move this round, is the earlier type. We'll talk a little bit more about the details of how the webbing changed in just a moment. These are both fully loaded, giving 150 rounds in total, with 10 pockets in total, 5 on each one holding 15 rounds in 3 5-round charges. We'll move this round now and we'll have a look at the left-hand side. Looking at the left-hand side of the mannequin, we'll start with the uniform first, and up on the epaulette here you can see we have the shoulder title, the regimental shoulder title, which we'll have a look at in close-up now. Here you can see the shoulder titles, and these show an abbreviated regimental title, N Lancashire. And looking at the sleeve of the service dress jacket, you can see this is quite plain. There's no embellishments, there's no dart to the cuff or anything, very utilitarian in that regard. Just lift this out of the way, we can look at the equipment here. You can see here the left-hand cartridge carrier, as I say, fully loaded. A problem emerged in service in that the bottom pockets, when leaning up against a parapet to fire, or in similar situations, the bottom pockets could actually be pulled open inadvertently and cartridges could be lost, the charges could fall out of the pockets. Now in late 1914, I believe it's October 1914, a change to the design was approved with an additional strap over the top of these, a change to the fastening to stop you losing ammunition, and it was demonstrated that even with the press studs undone, the pouches would not lose ammunition. You actually had to make an effort to withdraw ammunition from the pouches, even with the fastenings opened. So that change was introduced then. So at this stage, and through 1914, this is what was on issue. The design that's a little bit more familiar, the later pattern, didn't come in until very late 1914, and when manufacture first began, and of course there's a bit of a delay before it reached the field. So this is the early war configuration. The Haversack is a second issue example. And a third issue had actually been introduced in early 1914 with a simplification to the design. This retains features, this second issue example retains features which allow the water bottle to be carried on the front of the Haversack, have a loop of webbing stitched onto the flap here, and a buckle behind the flap there. And the design of the water bottle carrier allows a strap to be fed through this and buckled onto this buckle here, so you can carry the water bottle on top of the Haversack. Now, the idea of this was to carry the Haversack and the water bottle on the back. This feature of the design was removed by a change to the specification in early 1914. However, obviously there would be lots of these in use by the BEF because the change had only come relatively recently before the outbreak of war. So they included that there, an earlier pattern of Haversack, As I say, would have been very typical with the BEF at this time, because this had been in production for the majority of the years pre-war, and obviously many of the men would have been issued their equipment many months before, years before the outbreak of war, because these were British regulars at the time. Looking at the back of the Mannequin here, we can see the pack on the back. At this stage, everything still fits inside the pack. Late in 1914, even, you would start to see equipment and so forth slung off the pack, like the mess tins and so forth. There is an additional item carried in here, and this is one of the changes to pre-war configuration of the equipment, or the pre-war instructions of how things were to be carried. The outbreak of war, it was instructed that the iron ration would be moved from the haversack into the pack. So you have the iron ration in there, in addition to the normal load, which includes the crate coat, the mess tins, the hold all, hussif, and a cap comforter, and so on. The fitting instructions for the 1908 equipment do include a weight table, which gives you the contents prescribed for the pack. Now, the haversack would originally have carried the iron ration, that's been moved, but this would still carry the unconsumed portion of the day's rations, and the knife, fork and spoon are supposed to be carried in there as well, according to the fitting instructions. Beneath the pack, we have here the cover for the entrenching tool. Now this, according to the fitting instructions, is supposed to be carried around underneath the water bottle, so that's supposed to be carried on the hip as well. However, even in 1914, you see plenty of photographs of people with this moved around to the rear, so I've included that here. It's more comfortable to carry it there. I have tried both ways, and it's definitely more comfortable round on the rear, and I'm assuming in the field that was a fairly immediate change for greater comfort. And as I say, you do see it in period photographs, even very early war, that it's been moved round onto the rear of the equipment there. And it just hangs off the brace ends in a similar manner to the haversack, just down below the belt there. We'll move this round now and have a look at the right hand side. Speaking of the water bottle, if I lift the arm of the service dress jacket out of the way here, we can see the Mark VI enamel water bottle, and its felt cover here. You can see blue enamel, felt cover, and then carried inside the 1908 pattern carrier there on the brace ends. And this has a strap on the back. Well, the strap on the rear is loose. This strap comes all the way around and is loose. You can't see the back of it here, and that allows you to buckle the carrier onto the front of the haversack. The carrier and haversack were both modified to remove that feature early in 1914 for future manufacture, but obviously there would be plenty still in stock at this time, and they would be issued out. And indeed, many men would obviously already have been issued equipment many months and even years before that change came. So still carrying the earlier pattern of water bottle carrier there. You can see the cartridge carriers there, again fully loaded. 150 rounds in total, 75 rounds each side. One final thing I'll mention about the 1908 pattern web equipment is that it all buckles together as one piece. Well, once it's assembled like this, it can be taken on and off as one piece. The 1908 pack buckles directly onto the braces in this instance. Obviously there's no L-straps as you have later with the 1937 pattern. Now this does mean you can't dump the pack easily. However, it does also mean that it's all very well balanced. The weight is actually carried quite comfortably for the time, certainly, and the design is a very good one from that point of view, a great advance on many of the equipment sets being used by other armies at the time. So that's just another feature of the 1908 pattern web equipment that's worth mentioning here. So there we are, that's the kit and uniform of a private in the 1st Battalion of the Loyal North Lancashire Regiment, soon after landing at Le Havre in August of 1914. Very typical of British infantry at the time. Insignia aside, this is fairly generic. And it just goes to show that the individual British soldier at this time period was very well equipped, very modern equipment. We have cotton web equipment in contrast to a lot of the leather equipment that was being used on the continent, and of course a drab uniform, which even in contrast to some German uniforms and certainly in contrast to French uniforms of the period, is definitely the way to go. And obviously during the course of the war that will be seen with more drab uniforms being introduced, particularly by the French. So on an individual basis, very well equipped and very modern equipment. Where Britain lacked, of course, was in the machine gun and heavy artillery, and that would have to be redressed as the war continued. And obviously, as those who are in the know and seen previous videos such as Mannequin of the Month with the extra equipment and so forth added on, respirators, all that sort of thing, things not fitting in the pack anymore, carrying the haversack on the back, a lot of change would come to adapt the British equipment to the new conditions of trench warfare and war fighting during the Great War. But as I say, early in the war, the equipment and so forth, very much worn in its pre-war configuration, and this is very similar to what you would see immediate pre-war. There's very little changed yet at this stage. So there we are. I do hope you found that interesting, as I always say. If you have and you'd like to see more, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've already subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the little notification button down below. That will alert you, of course, when I upload future videos. If you'd like to vote on a topic for the Mannequin of the Month videos going forward, you can. If you subscribe to the Corporal tier over on Patreon, you get a chance to vote in the poll that decides what we're going to cover each month. And a massive thank you to those who support me through Patreon, and there's a PayPal link down below as well. It's greatly appreciated, everybody who supports the channel using those methods. Thank you very much indeed. There's photographs of this posted up on social media as well. There's Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, all linked down below. And if you want to make contact with me and get in touch, but you don't really use social media, there's also an email address down below as well. All of that's in the description. So that's everything I wanted to cover in this video. Until next time, bye for now.